Welcome to this explainer on the cloud's hidden memory bill. Look, if you're sitting there thinking your cloud setup is magically dodging the massive 2026 hardware memory crunch, well, we really need to talk. Today, we're diving straight into how this huge global shortage is silently creeping onto your cloud invoices, where it's going to hurt the most, and the exact steps you need to take right now to protect your budget. Let's jump in.
I hear tech leaders say this all the time. Good thing I'm in the cloud, right? I don't buy the memory, I just rent it. And hey, as RAM and SSD prices absolutely double out there in the hardware markets, that logic feels pretty solid. You outsource the infrastructure, you outsource the risk, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It is a dangerously flawed assumption. You are absolutely still paying for every single gigabyte of that DRAM. You've just lost the ability to see the bill clearly. Section 1. The cloud immunity myth. Let's just completely shatter this illusion. Moving your workloads to the cloud does not eliminate the hardware memory tax, not at all. It just acts like a disguise, laundering those massive upfront costs into creepy little invoice bumps on the instances you've probably been running for years. To really get what's going on, we need to understand a concept called the cost cascade. Think of it like a giant funnel. It's this incredibly reliable multi-step process where brutal, raw hardware price increases get diluted and passed right down the supply chain, eventually landing smack on your desk. You're never going to see a single line item on your AWS or Azure bill that literally says memory surcharge. It arrives completely disguised. So how does this actually happen? The journey from a fabrication plant in Korea to your monthly invoice takes 4 distinct steps. First up, at the wafer level, giants like Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron jacked up server DRAM prices by a staggering 60 to 70% compared to late 2025. Step 2, that massive hike flows into the OEM servers, your Dells, Lenovos, and HPs, and causes a 15 to 25% price jump for the physical machines. Step 3, those servers become the infrastructure cost for the cloud providers. And finally, step 4, to protect their own profit margins, those providers pass the cost along as a 5 to 10% hike on your invoice. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does a 70% spike at the factory turn into a survivable 7% bump on your bill? It's simple math. Memory only accounts for roughly 20 to 30% of a server's total bill of materials. That brutal memory jump gets watered down across the CPUs, the storage, the networking gear, and the chassis, all the stuff that didn't spike in price. So a modest-looking 7% increase on your invoice is actually a savage memory shortage. It's just hiding behind 3 layers of mathematical dilution. Session 2. The broken cloud promise. For literally 20 years, the whole cloud industry was built on one quiet, golden rule. Migrate your systems, accept the vendor lock-in, and we promise your compute costs will only ever go down over time. Well, that unwritten rule just died. History was made on January 4th, 2026. AWS broke precedent and raised prices for the first time. They slapped a roughly 15% hike on GPU capacity. Specifically, the 8H200 instance jumped straight from $34.61 an hour to $39.80 an hour. And look, once the door to price increases is kicked open by the biggest player in the market, it simply does not close again. And guys, this is absolutely not an isolated incident. OVH Cloud's CEO recently said the quiet part out loud, explicitly forecasting 5 to 10% hikes. Now, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud might be keeping quiet publicly for now, but remember, they all buy from the exact same OEMs facing the exact same memory bills. Because cloud providers usually lag in hardware procurement by 3 to 6 months, all the data points to the entire industry making massive, unavoidable price adjustments between Q2 and Q3 of 2026.
Okay, we really need to talk about the discount trap, because this is where teams get burned. Say your base price is $100,000 and you got a sweet 15% enterprise discount. That brings you down to $85,000. Fantastic. But when that underlying on-demand base price jumps to $115,000 because of the memory hike, your 15% discount is now taken off the top of that new inflated number. Your new total paid is $97,750. You are paying $12,750 more in absolute dollars for the exact same workload. Your fixed percentage discount did literally nothing to protect you from that baseline shifting. So where is this going to hurt the most? It's not evenly distributed. These hidden adjustments disproportionately target your memory-hungry resources. The most exposed are your memory-optimized instances, so AWS's R-Series, Azure's E-Series, or Google's HiMem. It also hits managed services like Redis, Elasticache, and in-memory databases really hard. Why? Because their underlying cost is pretty much all DRAM. Compute-optimized instances might only see a gentle 3 to 7% bump, but the memory-heavy ones, they are leading the charge upward.
Section 3. The repatriation reality. So, how is the enterprise world actually reacting to this brutal financial hit? The super tempting knee-jerk reaction is just to rage quit, pull everything out of the cloud, and bring it back on premises. But let's take a breath and look at the real economics. We know that renting that AWS cluster is now sitting at roughly $40 an hour post-hike. Now, buying those 8 H200s outright, that's going to hit you with a heavy upfront cost of roughly $240,000 to $320,000. But here is the critical math. When you amortize that upfront cost over a standard 3-year lifespan, it breaks down to just $15 to $20 per hour. If you've got a steady workload that you run flat out for years, owning is effectively half the price of renting. And this 2026 memory shortage just dramatically widened that gap. And honestly, the smartest people in the room are already moving on this. A massive 83% of CIOs report that they plan to repatriate at least some of their workloads in 2026. This isn't just theory anymore. It's a huge industry-wide resorting. Now, only a tiny sliver are planning a 100% exit. The vast majority are doing a very sober audit of which specific workloads actually belong where in this new economic reality. Which brings us to the new default strategy, hybrid. You can't escape the memory shortage completely. If you buy servers for your own data center, you're still paying that 15 to 25% OEM premium. For spiky, elastic, unpredictable workloads, the cloud is absolutely still the right answer. Providers have the scale to get scarce hardware, and let's face it, you can't buy half a GPU cluster for a 2-week experiment. But for those predictable, steady baselines with high utilization, on-premises ownership is where it's at because the amortization totally works in your favor. Section 4. Action Plan for 2026. Knowing all this, what do you actually do? Right now, the market is rewarding exactly the kind of discipline that most engineering teams love to put off. Let's fix that. Grab a pen because here is your FinOps lifeline. First, audit your memory footprint right now. You have to separate the RAM you're actually using from what's just provisioned. Idle RAM used to be a rounding error. Today, it's the biggest waste on your bill. Second, right-size aggressively and immediately. A 128GB instance that only ever uses 40GB is just bleeding cash. Third, and this is huge, lock in your pricing before the Q2 and Q3 market adjustments hit. Negotiate your savings plans now, not against a spiked market. Fourth, match every single workload to its cheapest venue. Steady goes on-prem, spiky stays in the cloud. And finally, cost tracking is now a continuous process. Doing leisurely quarterly reviews, that's dead. In 2026, prices can literally change on a Saturday. The bottom line here is that you can't just dodge this tax. The escape hatch isn't magically guessing between cloud or on-prem. It's choosing discipline over drift. Which leaves me with a pretty critical question for you to chew on. For those predictable workloads you're thinking about bringing in-house, do you actually know the real cost of building your own local inference rig in 2026? Knowing that math is the absolute key to surviving this crunch, and it's exactly what we're going to break down in our next explainer. Thanks so much for learning with me today. Stay focused out there, and I'll catch you in the next one.